Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Live It Up, the show where we explore and discuss how to take your life to that next level and beyond. We cover health, wealth, relationships, and how to create a life you absolutely love. I'm your host and coach, Fletcher Ellingson. Amy will be joining us in a bit as we take on a health subject that I know very little about, but will be especially of interest to all the women listening. We're going to be talking about menopause. Remember, health is the first wealth, so stick around for that conversation. As a reminder, if you have questions you would like us to answer on or off the air, you can email me directly at fletcher@fletcherellingson.com. Okay, let's get to today's email. It says, Fletcher, my girlfriend and my parents don't seem to get along. It isn't that they fight, they just don't interact much. They don't really say much to each other. She's worried they don't like her and dreads the idea of spending time there. They don't dislike her, but there is not a lot of warmth or conversation on either side. I want them to work this out because it's uncomfortable when we do get together. What do you suggest? Signed, Caught in the Middle. So, caught in the middle. Thanks for reaching out. Asking for help is a sign of strength. Now let's get to it. Your girlfriend is uncomfortable around your folks and worried that they don't like her. And as you stated, there's not a lot of warmth and conversation on the part of either party. I can imagine that is uncomfortable. The best way to handle this situation is to simply be direct. Ask your parents to share honestly with you and ask the same of your girlfriend. Is there an issue? Ask them if they have an issue with her and ask her if she has an issue with them. If you don't have an honest conversation, all people are left to do then is to make up stories. And then they focus on these stories and begin believing them and acting like they're the truth when in fact they're just stories that have been made up. So it's going to be important that you talk to them. Next, they're going to have to create the relationship that they want to have. And how do you do that? Well, you just get it out on the table. You talk about it. One of them is going to have to be brave enough to say, hey, I'm worried that you don't like me, or I'm feeling insecure, or I'm not sure how to really connect with you, but I want to. You see, once they get past their fear of judgments, then they can say what they're committed to creating. It'll take courage, it'll take vulnerability, but if you're not intentional about it, then it could be a very long time, even years, before a connection happens. And that could drive a huge wedge between you and your parents or you and your girlfriend. I also suggest that you create opportunities to foster connection and bonding. Now, a great way to do this is to play games. At our house, we're a game-playing family, and it's a great way to connect and bond. It requires interaction, there's talking, there's usually an opportunity to team up, right? There's joking, there's high-fiving, right? Friendly, jabbing going on, or find another activity that gets you out and moving and engaged. Maybe it's going for a hike or a drive, or maybe it's fishing. I don't know, whatever floats your boat. But when people engage in a group activity, it promotes conversation, and therefore connection, and therefore bonding. So, to recap, be courageous. Have an honest conversation with your girlfriend and your parents. Then find activities which you can all connect around. Again, cards or board games can be an effective strategy. And you're going to need to step up and take the lead on this, because you can't wait for other people. This is too important of a topic, right? This is your life. And like I said, it can easily drive a wedge between relationships if this just goes unaddressed. So be courageous, right? And I can tell you that it's absolutely possible. So envision it and step into action. You can do this, and I believe in you. As a reminder, if you have questions you want us to answer on or off the air, send them directly to me at fletcher@fletcherellingson.com. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll be talking health with Amy. Stay with us. Hey everybody, welcome back to Live It Up. We are here with Amy. Hey Amy.
Hello.
It's the health segment.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Tell us what we're talking about today.
We're talking about menopause.
All right. I know absolutely nothing about it, so what is it?
Well, I think the other night you guessed that it was when a woman couldn't become pregnant anymore. That
Yes.
was your definition, which is technically part of the definition. So in medicine, we say that someone, in the United States, we call menopause when someone has not had a period for 12 months. And so it is the time when they also are officially not fertile anymore. But that's the definition that we use. And obviously we're talking about a woman in her late 40s or 50s who's otherwise healthy. Obviously, if you don't have a period for a year and you're only 30, there's going to be likely a different, something else going on.
That was going to be one of my questions. So, okay, cool. So what's the age range when this happens?
So the average age of menopause, again, in our country is 52, and the normal range would be 45 to 55. So anything that happens earlier than that is not necessarily normal. It happens, but it's a little bit out of range.
You said in our country. Does that happen at different ages?
So yeah, some countries have, I can't remember exactly which countries, but some countries do. The average age is more like in the late 40s.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there symptoms that women can watch for to know if it's happening or about to happen?
One you probably have heard, right?
I have hot flashes.
Hot flashes
Yeah.
is what, again, it's kind of, in our country, hot flashes is the biggest, the most bothersome symptom. But a lot of women will enter what we call not a lot of women enter what we call perimenopause in maybe their mid-40s. And that can be a time where the periods may get heavier, they may have worsening PMS symptoms, they may even have some hot flashes, sometimes sleep disturbances, and then closer to your 50s or maybe 50 to 52, then periods start to spread out, like you may skip a month or two, and then eventually you skip 6 months, then maybe have a period, and then you might then go that full year.
And when you say hot flashes, I mean, I assume I know what it means, but is it like just all of a sudden you just like get flushed and you feel
Yeah, like
hot,
all of a sudden, and they don't understand exactly what happens or exactly what causes it, but all of a sudden, yeah, you become, kind of red, hot. You might boom and get sweaty, like you might get a little sweat on your upper lip kind of thing, and you just feel really hot, and it lasts a minute or two.
Okay, but it's not like you spike a fever or anything?
No.
Okay. All right. Are there any other symptoms, or is that pretty much it?
Well, those are the symptoms that you said if someone to know that it's happening or about to happen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between being menopausal and postmenopausal?
Yeah, so it's a little, the terms are used, the terms we mostly use would be premenopausal when nothing is going on. So say you're a woman in your 30s, you're definitely premenopausal. Then there would be perimenopause, where you might be starting to have some symptoms, maybe around age 45 to 50. And then when you've entered menopause, that's like the actual 12-month mark. Like you are now in menopause. And so then once you're in that, then you're called postmenopausal. So a woman who has already gone through menopause, which is her menses have stopped or paused, then she is postmenopausal.
Got it. So the menopause that you're referring to is like that 12-month period.
After the 12-month period, like once she's hit the 12-month period, it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
If you're menopausal or postmenopausal, it's kind of used interchangeably in the lay, speaking.
Gotcha. Okay. So are there any benefits to the body?
Besides the obvious one that women like, where they don't get any more periods, that's a huge bonus, right? To not have to deal with that, not have to buy supplies and not have all that. But as far as women losing their sex hormones, which they basically all of a sudden don't have, estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone, or not much of it at all, then that does eventually lead to some. The women up to that point had been fairly protected against bone loss. There can be the beginning of dementia and heart disease. Estrogen is actually really protective against a lot of things, and testosterone. So once a woman loses those sex hormones, there's not a huge benefit to that, actually. If you compare it to the fact that most men are still fertile until they die, and their testes, which is the equivalent like of our ovaries, are still making testosterone for their whole lives.
Gotcha. Okay. So you've indicated a couple times in our discussion this morning that women in other countries might have a different experience of this. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so, menopause, if you think about all the talk, it's like we have a story around menopause in our country. And so that story frequently is about hot flashes, is what most people talk about. And it's a fairly interesting subject. There's all kinds of articles on it that are pretty long, but there's actually some cultures that define menopause even differently. They'll define it based on what age they are, or it's not really, they're not checking whether someone's had their period or not. They're just called menopause. I don't know what the exact term is, but it's actually defined differently in other cultures. And the other thing is, in other cultures, they don't necessarily report hot flashes as the biggest symptom. So like in the Philippines, the women will describe headaches as the most bothersome symptom of menopause, and hot flashes are at the bottom of the list. And then in India, they don't describe like anything. It's just like there's no symptoms to menopause. It just happens. And some of that is related to potentially body fat differences, because women's body fat actually contains a lot of estrogen, so it does affect how they go through menopause, and Americans do tend to be heavier and more body fat, but there's also like a cultural story that goes along with menopause.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So are headaches a symptom that people...
I don't ever really hear about headaches. If anything, headaches frequently get better because a lot of women have headaches that are hormonally driven or around the time of their period. And so when those stop, then they don't have those migraines anymore. They don't have headaches anymore.
Interesting. So you've talked about clocks in our body. Is this an example of one of our body clocks?
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I think the human body is amazing, and I keep saying that, but I'm glad I feel like you are now seeing how amazing it is since we started doing this show.
I am.
Yeah, so the body has these amazing clocks, and so if you talk about the fact that the average age of menopause is at 52, like that's a weird thing. Like why is it that all of a sudden that happens, and like across the world it happens? So there's definitely a biological clock when that happens, and it's not, if you think about how many billions of women have been alive in the world, to have a age range of maybe 10 years is pretty accurate. So each female infant is born with approximately 2 million immature eggs, and they're born with 2 ovaries usually, and so between those 2 ovaries you have 2 million eggs. Wow. And then in the years leading up to puberty, a lot of eggs die each month, and they're just programmed to die. These follicles that kind of support the immature egg die.
And what you were saying earlier, I just want to interject here, is that the female baby is born with all of the eggs she'll ever have.
Right, you don't ever make, and they're immature eggs, but you don't ever make any new kind of immature eggs in your whole lifetime, right? So it's very cool. And so then by the time a girl has reached her teenage years, she has about 300 to 400,000 eggs left. And then menopause is actually...
Out of 11 million?
No, 2 million.
Oh, out of 2 million.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, out of 2 million.
And so then at the time of menopause, there are no more follicles. I mean, that's another way to kind of define it. There are no more follicles, and the follicle is what supports the egg, and that's actually what helps kind of cause these cyclical variations in the estrogen and progesterone each month for a woman. So that is that clock winding down. There are no more eggs. The woman's producing no more estrogen and progesterone. You don't need to support a lining that would support a pregnancy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when a woman has gone through pregnancy, no more eggs. That's it.
Menopause.
I mean, yeah, menopause.
Right.
No more eggs.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. Yeah.
Pretty wild. So what are some examples of other body clocks?
Well, you have, puberty is a body clock, right? So, and that's interesting too, because every country has like different, those also comes at different ages. In the US, it comes a little bit early, but so boys have a puberty clock, girls have a puberty clock, where there's an average age range. And again, if you think of the billions of people that have been alive, that age range is pretty tight if you think about all those kids. So that's definitely one. On a daily basis, we have kind of our circadian rhythm. So, melatonin starts being produced in the evening when we start seeing a decrease in the sunlight. And then in the morning, we have a high cortisol level, which is part of our circadian rhythm. So we have a lot of different clocks.
Very cool.
Yeah.
One more question before we go to break. Is a woman who has had a hysterectomy considered to be in menopause?
No, not necessarily. So most women, not most women, a lot of women don't really know what has been taken out when they have a hysterectomy. So a hysterectomy, you definitely take the uterus out, but a woman's frequently isn't sure, did they take my cervix, did they take my ovaries? And they just don't really remember. But if a uterus is just taken out, they would try to leave, especially if a woman is premenopausal, so before 52, they would try, or before 50 maybe, they would leave the ovaries in, because it's much better to get your own hormones than to have to take outside, pills or patches or something when you're younger. So if your ovaries remain in, then you're not menopausal. If your ovaries have been removed, then we call it surgical menopause, which means that you've been put into menopause all of a sudden because your ovaries have been removed. And those women, it's really, really important that they are on hormones until, I would say for longer than 52, but they really should be on that, because that's the time where your bones are still being built. It's helpful for your arteries, so you really need those sex hormones around. And then a woman who there's some women that have had one ovary removed, they may enter menopause a little earlier, just because they have less estrogen, because they just have that one ovary making it.
Fascinating. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to be back with more discussion, so stay with us. Hey everybody, we're back. Welcome back to Live It Up. We're talking here with Amy, and we're talking about menopause today. I'm learning a lot of new stuff. So another question for you. Should a woman do something as she is entering into this, or you just go through it and try to get through it?
Yeah, so that's a very personal decision for each woman, and based on her family history and her personal history and her preferences. There are definitely some patients I've met, they feel like menopause is natural, normal, they just want to go through it. And then there are other women that definitely want to do something about it. So there are lots of help out there. There's lots of help out there for hot flashes. And
what would that look like?
Well, there are, the hormones with estrogen and progesterone, mostly estrogen is what's going to help with hot flashes. It will basically just take hot flashes away. Really, that's the most effective option. Depending, again, on the safety for a woman using hormones, depending on their personal history and their preferences, they may not be candidate for hormones, or they don't want to be on hormones, but that really is the most effective. Women probably have hot flashes. If they do have them, they may have them for 2 to 5 years. There are some patients that have hot flashes until their 80s, and it's very rare, but it can happen. But there are also lots of things that women can do in their diet and lifestyle. It's nice. I always want to try to empower people into taking care of their own health. But hot flashes can be made worse by hot weather, smoking, caffeine, spicy foods, alcohol, tight clothing, and stress. And so avoiding or lessening those things can help. Also, eating foods with plant estrogens can help. So like soybeans, chickpeas, lentils, some other vegetables that have plant estrogens can help. And they've done some studies with regular physical exercise, that vigorous exercise 4 or 5 days a week, that also reduced hot flashes. I don't really understand why, but you actually really want to have like a vigorous workout. So women that do that will also have been shown to have less hot flashes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely a supporter. I do bioidentical hormone in my clinic. I believe in it in the right patient population. And there's a really great book out there called The Estrogen Window. There's more and more talk about women in that first 10 years after menopause being on hormones like right away, and at least for that 10 years, because it may help reduce the risk of heart disease and maybe even cognitive decline and osteoporosis. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely talk to your doctor about it. There's plenty of providers in Wenatchee and Chelan that do that. And if someone can't take hormones or doesn't want to, there also are some other pharmaceuticals that can help with hot flashes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does this affect libido, or does it?
Yeah, well, it definitely does. So that's another really common complaint that I hear from my patients. It really is it can be problematic for them, problematic for their relationship. And there are a couple of things going on, but one is your ovaries are no longer making estrogen and testosterone. Those are really your main sources of it. And estrogen and testosterone are what drive libido. So without those sex hormones, so here if you're married to a man, if a woman's married to a man, he's still making testosterone at maybe a normal amount, and then a woman all of a sudden is making none, and so their libidos are going to be mismatched, and that's not fun. And the second thing is that without those sex hormones, there are a lot of changes in the woman's vagina, and so it can make sex less painful, or sorry, less enjoyable and even downright painful. And then if it becomes painful, obviously the woman's not going to want to have sex. And so it's really something that needs to be talked about between the couples. I see it, I know I brought this up on the show before, but so much of the time a patient comes in with a concern or complaint and hasn't talked to their significant other about it. And especially when you're talking about the intimacy, that's something that you really want to talk about and understand what's happening and explain to your partner if you are having pain or and discomfort. That's something that you can get help with for sure.
Okay. Good to know. What do you hear from your patients that are the most bothersome symptoms?
Well, again, typically, like it's reflected in the studies, I hear about hot flashes mostly. And so not only are they uncomfortable and they can be disruptive because you get very hot, but also women are working, and so they might be in the middle of a meeting with somebody and all of a sudden they get red, they're starting to sweat, you know, and they're distracted a bit because they all of a sudden get so hot. And so even just as a professional woman, it can be embarrassing and distracting. Plus it can bother your sleep. And so then you're not as well rested. And so it definitely can impact your professional life for sure, and just your overall well-being. The other symptoms I hear about are some women will experience an increase in anxiety or irritability, sleeping problems, and decrease in mental clarity. That's something I also will hear, maybe like a mental fogginess, and then the decrease in libido. The other thing I didn't mention was also women, their body shape changes, and women really don't like that, especially women that have been quite fit and athletic. They'll start to, you know, get more fat around the middle or notice less tone. It can be harder to lose weight, and that's really frustrating too.
Darn.
I know.
A lot of challenges.
Yeah, it's true.
Speaking of that, I mean, the woman has to take the brunt of all these challenges. Is there anything that a partner can do?
Definitely. I think, you know, being sensitive to it, asking a woman about it, asking her how she feels about it, is there anything they can do to help? Because it's not only physically, but it's mentally. A lot of women also start to feel old when this happens. They no longer are part of that premenopausal club where it makes it very obvious to them that they're not 30 or 40 anymore, that they're now menopausal. Again, they don't have the period, which is nice, but they can start to feel old. And so really helping that woman, you know, still have her sense of self-worth and supporting her. And then also talking about intimacy, checking in with her, making sure everything's okay, that it's feeling good. And so that can still be something that you can continue as a couple.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right, lots of good stuff. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
There's just lots of good websites. You know, look into it and ask your doctor about it. There's so many things to help. You don't need to suffer through this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that is it for us. So, you know what it's time to do now? Get out there, be a source of kindness, be a source of contribution. You have something to offer this world, and we believe in you.